And so, we will give at least 31, at least. Doesn't mean it has to be 31/3/2026. We'll aspire for that, but we want to make it very smooth, and it will also be phased. It will not be, that all the regulations, all the norms kick in from day one, which will be at the earliest 31/3/2026.
Thank you, sir. Next is Hamsini from Money Control.
Hi, sir. I'll stay put on this part around regulations. Your language also today seemed to indicate that there will be a lot more consultative process in the way that you would go about building regulations. You did clarify on LCR, but what we've also seen, especially in the last 4 years, and more so in the last 1.5 years, is certain banks and NBFCs facing ban on businesses, certain aspects of businesses. There are 2 large banks still waiting to come out of restrictive business policies. Would you rethink your approach on how you would want to target banks or work with them to rectify some of the follies? And as a clarification, you did mention about LCR, but what about on project finance and investment guidelines that banks are permitted to take in subsidiaries, etc.? Would you want to defer, or there has been request for a deferment on that as well? Would you want to consider those proposed policies also favorably, sir?
See, ECL was only a discussion paper. Even the draft is not out. So there is no time frame for implementation of ECL guidelines. Similarly, project finance, you can rest assured, I think they will need more time. 31/3/2026 is the earliest. Moreover, they need to be seen in conjunction with each other. There is a certain amount of overlap between ECL and project finance. So we are examining, because for project finance, the draft regulations were certainly published, comments have been received, suggestions have been received. We are examining them, and we'll come out with something, I want to assure all of you, that which balances the interests of the public, the depositors, the financial stability, which is very, very important for our country, and at the same time, the concerns of the banks, keeping in mind the efficient use of resources. And what was your second question? Sorry, is on, two banks, where we have cease and desist measures. See, these measures are taken after great consideration, after great thought, after giving opportunity to these entities, whether it is these banks or others. I'm not, making reference to any particular entity. And these are measures actually, of last resort. We would not like to use them, too often. This is a measure of last resort to be used in the rarest of the rare circumstances, when all other measures have actually failed. And they are again, in the interest of the public, and we'll keep, this policy going forward as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next will be Ms. Gopika from the Mint.
Thank you, Puneet. Thank you, Governor. My question is on inflation forecast. You've retained the inflation forecast for this year and next year. But have you taken into account the impact of rupee depreciation while accounting, or have you factored in the impact of rupee depreciation while calculating or looking at the forecast? And my second question is on the new Deputy Governor. For Monetary Policy, when can we expect the appointment?
Second question you have to ask the government, it's not for me. Your first question, yes. The latest rupee to dollar rate was taken into account while making, all our projections. So, and we also do, various sensitivity analysis. So yes, a brief answer to your question is yes, that was certainly considered while making our projections.
थैंक यू सर. अब मैं जी बिजनेस से एकता सूरी को आमंत्रित करूंगा.
गुड आफ्टरनून सर। सर हमने आपकी स्पीच में सुना कि आपने फ्रॉड्स के ऊपर बात की कि .in होगा बैंकों का डोमेन नेम, लेकिन बहुत सारे इश्यूज हैं जो कस्टमर्स फेस करते हैं फ्रॉड्स की। अगर हम बात करें, सबसे पहले कोई रिपोर्ट करता है फ्रॉड तो उसे पैसा जल्दी वापस नहीं मिलता। दूसरा, पेस्की कॉल्स बहुत ज्यादा आते हैं नॉर्मल मोबाइल नंबर से। बहुत बार आपने बोला है कि आप टॉप अप लोन्स, जो होम टॉप अप लोन्स है, उसे पर्सनल लोन्स की तरह एडवर्टाइज मत करें। अभी भी वो हो रहा है। 1600-140 नंबर्स भी आपने बोला है ट्रांजैक्शंस और मार्केटिंग के लिए होंगे, लेकिन वो भी कोई नहीं सुन रहा। तो ऐसे सिनेरियो में क्या आरबीआई कोई स्ट्रिक्ट एक्शन लेगा बैंकों के ऊपर ताकि ये कस्टमर का बचाव हो इन सब सिनेरियोज में?
निश्चित रूप से हमारा पूरा प्रयास रहेगा कि जो भी हमारे ग्राहक हैं, जो जनता है, उनको अधिक से अधिक सुविधाजनक तरीके से बैंकिंग की समस्त सेवाएं उपलब्ध हों। चाहे वो बैंकिंग फ्रॉड से संबंधित हो, जैसा कि आपने कहा, या आपने कहा पेस्की कॉल्स उनको आते हैं, उसमें किस प्रकार से जो है हमें उसमें कार्य करना चाहिए, किस प्रकार से हमें उन्हें हिदायत देनी चाहिए और क्या हमें उसके खिलाफ एक्शन लेना चाहिए, वो निश्चित रूप से इस संदर्भ में लिया जाएगा। और अधिक आपने कई सारी छोटी छोटी चीजें पूछी हैं, विस्तृत जानकारी के लिए मैं अनुरोध करूंगा हमारे डीजीज को कि वो आपको इसके बारे में कुछ और, क्योंकि हमने कई कदम इसके बारे में ऑलरेडी लिए हैं, तो संक्षेप में मैं रिक्वेस्ट करूंगा स्वामीनाथन जी को और राजेश्वर राव को कि वो इसके बारे में बताएं। और आप यू कैन स्पीक इन
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I think I'll take the liberty of responding in English.
I know you
to avoid any ambiguity.
Yes.
To avoid any ambiguity. Thank you, sir. I think just to supplement on that, yes, you also mentioned about the steps that we have already taken. So as far as the regulated entities are concerned, instructions are already in place to use certain series of 140 or 1600. We also do a lot of awareness campaigns to educate the consumers how to stay away from pesky or fraudulent calls. As all, it is also put in place from a regulation perspective, limiting the liability of customers in unauthorized electronic banking transactions is in place. The provision to give us shadow credit pending full investigation is also kept in place. And adherence to this is also examined when we do the on-site supervision. But oftentimes there are also pesky calls that emanate from unregulated entities and apps and platforms. This is something which only an active collaboration of the government, regulator and the law enforcement we will be able to work on. But this is something which we are conscious of, and we will take every possible step to ensure that the consumer's interest is protected. And wherever there has been a loss, it is our endeavor to work towards an early redressal.
Sir, I know you've mentioned a lot of things that are already in place, but since banks, even if RBI continuously keeps on saying that you have to do this, banks do not listen. Till the date, banks have advertised home top-up loans as personal loans, saying take the loan, use it for your marriage, use it for travel. Or, when you go for a loan, they insist on taking, you have to take an insurance or a credit card. Mis-selling is on rampant. So on these issues, any supervisory action?
See, there are 2-3 issues that you mentioned. Each of them, of course, the framework is certainly in place. Oftentimes, as Governor also mentioned, many of this behavior which is not consistent with the regulations, we resolve through dialogue. A supervisory action which gets publicized is only in the rarest of the rare cases where there are egregious violation or the most outlier behavior. Otherwise, oftentimes, the supervisors engage with the entities on a bilateral basis and ensure that the regulatory guidelines are adhered to. So that shall be our endeavor. You may not get to read them in the media, but wherever there is a non-compliance, on an annual basis and also on an ongoing basis, we deal with the entities, and oftentimes they all are
क्लच दबाने की आदत से परेशान? क्लच की आदत हटाओ, ऑल इलेक्ट्रिक रोर इजी चलाओ, क्योंकि अब से इंडिया राइड्स इजी।
purposes, it would be taken as an unsecured lending and will have to be dealt with accordingly by the bank. That is one point. As regards this mis-selling and forced insurance, RBI guidelines are already in place regarding this mis-selling issues, and we are also looking at comprehensively reviewing these guidelines. We should be trying to come out with some guidelines shortly on this area also, on the conduct of the banks in various areas.
थैंक यू सर्स। अब मैं अनुराग शाह से आग्रह करूंगा कि वो अपना प्रश्न पूछें।
थैंक यू पुनीत सर, थैंक यू गवर्नर सर। जिस तरह से आरबीआई ने भी कहा था कि जो बैंकों के द्वारा इंश्योरेंस कंपनियों में निवेश किया जाता है या फिर जो दूसरी सब्सिडरीज में निवेश किया जाता है, उसके निवेश से जुड़ी हुई गाइडलाइन जो है वो आरबीआई की तरफ से कब तक आ जाएगी, और क्या उसमें हम ये भी देख सकते हैं कि जो बड़ी इंश्योरेंस कंपनी है कोई बैंक के अंदर मेजॉरिटी हिस्सा खरीदने का भी उस तरह का प्रावधान होगा? और सर अभी जब जिस तरह से कुछ वक्त पहले वित्त मंत्री ने भी बैंकिंग प्लेटफॉर्म के जरिए मिस सेलिंग की चिंता जताई थी, चीफ आईआरडीए के चेयरमैन के द्वारा भी चिंता जताई गई थी स्पेशली इंश्योरेंस के संदर्भ में, तो क्या आरबीआई का डेटा भी उसको सपोर्ट करता है या फिर आरबीआई का क्या कहना है?
नहीं, देखिए, जैसा कि अभी आपको स्वामीनाथन डीजी ने बताया कि मिस सेलिंग के हम लोग बिल्कुल सख्त खिलाफ हैं। कोई भी इस प्रकार का यदि वाकया होता है, इस प्रकार का कोई भी इंस्टेंस हमारे ध्यान में आता है, तो निश्चित रूप से उसके विरुद्ध सख्त से सख्त कार्रवाई की जाएगी। आप इस बात के बारे में बिल्कुल 100% निश्चिंत रहें कि किसी भी ग्राहक के विरुद्ध यदि मिस सेलिंग की कोई भी शिकायत है तो रिजर्व बैंक उसके लिए उसके साथ में नहीं है और उसके विरुद्ध में उस बैंक या रेगुलेटेड एंटिटी के विरुद्ध में कार्रवाई होगी। कार्रवाई किस प्रकार से होगी, जैसा कि पीजी स्वामीनाथन जी ने भी आपको बताया, वो हमारे को उसके लिए ऐसा नहीं है कि हम उसको बैंक को बोलें कि हम आपका रजिस्ट्रेशन ही बंद कर देते हैं, लाइसेंस बंद कर देते हैं। ऐसा तो नहीं किया जा सकता, आप भी ये समझेंगे। लेकिन हम इसके लिए बहुत ज़्यादा गंभीर हैं और इस प्रकार की अगर कोई घटनाएं होती हैं तो उनको गंभीरता से लिया जाएगा। पहला आपका जो प्रश्न था वो था कि किस स्वरूप में जो बैंकिंग कंपनियां हैं और उन्होंने कई सारी अपनी सब्सिडरीज वगैरह बनाई हुई हैं, एनबीएफसीज हैं, इंश्योरेंस कंपनीज हैं, उसके बारे में एक मसौदा जो नियम का है, रेगुलेशंस का, वो हमने प्रकाशित किया है और उसके बारे में कई सारे सुझाव हमारे पास में, टिप्पणियां, सुझाव हमारे पास में आए हुए हैं, उनका हम अध्ययन कर रहे हैं। देखिए, जैसे मैंने आपको बताया, ये सब चीज़ों को हम ध्यान में रखते हुए उनके सुझावों को पूरा से गहनता से अध्ययन करने के बाद में ही कोई निर्णय लेंगे। मैं इतना ही इसके ऊपर में आपको बताना चाहूँगा कि अगर कोई कंपनी या बैंक एक और सब्सिडरी के मार्फत से वही बिजनेस, वही व्यापार करती है, तो उससे जो है दो प्रकार की हमारे को समस्याएं सामने आती हैं। एक, कॉन्फ्लिक्ट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट रहेगा, क्योंकि वो सेम कंपनी है तो इस कंपनी में व्यापार हो या उसमें हो तो एक कॉन्फ्लिक्ट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट है। दूसरा जो इसके अंदर में समस्या है वो ये है कि एक रेगुलेटरी आर्बिट्राज है। बैंक्स एक अलग कानून के ढांचे में कार्य करते हैं, एनबीएफसीज एक अलग कानून के ढांचे में करते हैं, तो उसकी वजह से जो रिस्क्स हैं एनबीएफसीज के वो बैंक्स के ऊपर में न आए, इसके पीछे में ये जो हमने जो मसौदा प्रकाशित किया है उसके पीछे में ये है, ये उसके पीछे में विचार है। ये बात भी हमें ध्यान है कि कई सारी कंपनियां, कई सारे बैंक्स ऑलरेडी इसमें लेगेसी इश्यूज हैं, तो वो ऑलरेडी जो हैं उन्होंने इस प्रकार की कई सारे एनबीएफसीज, कंपनियां, सब्सिडरीज स्थापित की हुई हैं। तो उनके बारे में अब हमें क्या करना होगा, क्योंकि हमने ही उनको इस प्रकार की पहले अनुमति दी। तो अब इन सब चीजों को सोच करके और विचार करके किस प्रकार से हम आगे इसमें एक सब मिलजुल करके, ताकि लोगों के जो डिपॉजिटर्स हैं उनके भी ध्यान को, हित को ऊपर रखते हुए, और साथ ही साथ जो हमारे अन्य जो हितधारक हैं, जिनमें बैंक भी सम्मिलित हैं, बैंक के ओनर्स सम्मिलित हैं, तो उनको सबको ध्यान में रखते हुए ही हम कोई कदम इसके बारे में लेंगे.
धन्यवाद सर. Next will be Mr. Vishwanath from NDTV Profit.
Good afternoon, Governor. Thank you so much, Minister. Governor Vishwanath Nair from NDTV Profit. Two things that made sort of a debut in your speech. First was the less restrictive monetary policy, which I think a lot of people expected a rate cut but weren't sure how long this was going to last. So I just want to understand from you, when you say that the MPC feels a less restrictive monetary policy is appropriate in the current juncture, is it limited to this policy, or are we talking about the next few quarters? And the other, second part which made a debut, and that's in continuation with these regulatory moves, is the cost of regulation, which I've never heard the RBI talk about. At least the RBI always talks about the need for regulation, not so much the cost for regulation. Yes. I just wanted to understand from you, so far a lot of my colleagues here have written about how the RBI is a no-nonsense regulator, sort of an iron fist type of regulator. Are we changing that face at all?
No, I can't talk, about the past. It will not be correct on my part, to sit on judgment. But I would certainly say that RBI as an institution has been able to, over the years, carry out the mandate that has been given to it. And I would also like to say that I do think that the cost of regulation may not have heard of it is a different thing. But I think back, consciously or unconsciously, I think consciously, this would certainly have been a factor in determining what, they are going to do. You may not have heard it, that's a different thing. So I can't say about that, but what one can see, having been outside the RBI and having interacted with the RBI, been on board of the RBI, is that certainly, all these factors are certainly, considered while making any regulations. So it's not only, about financial stability, it is also, about the cost at which, these things come in. I only made it very, very clear so that everyone is, assured about that. So this is one. And second, you said, whether this is policy only for this. Well, obviously, when we are keeping a neutral stance, and as was mentioned, the rationale for that is the tremendous uncertainties, that we are facing today. That does not call us, to change our stance. So our stance remains neutral. This restrictive, less restrictive policy is only, for this particular MPC meeting, and not, going forward. This stance continues to be neutral. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, we'll have Mr. Chris from FT.
Hi there. Thank you very much. I was wondering how concerned you are about the recent pressure on the rupee going forwards, and are you also worried about imported inflation?
Well, the rupee is the rate, that the rupee settles at is a function, of the demand and supply, number one. Number two, I would also like to say, that we should really, not be looking at, but that's, perhaps our job, and so we do it. We should not really be looking at, a day-to-day kind of a volatility. It is, more the long-term rate, that we should be looking at. And when I say this, I say this, not only for the rupee, but also for other asset classes, whether it is the Sensex or the Nifty, or whether, it is the gold prices or the asset prices. Day-to-day movements may not be, all that, important. As I mentioned, this was certainly factored in while deciding on the rate cut and the stance that we are maintaining. It was certainly factored in. That's one thing I would like to say. And the second thing is, of course, as you are aware, that a higher higher or a lower, or depreciated rupee certainly, puts pressure on inflation. But at the same time, global uncertainties are also, I think a higher worry, for us would be the global uncertainties as to how, that pans out. So global uncertainties, even if, the trade wars, the tariff trade wars were not to carry out, but just the uncertainty in itself is something, which is worrisome. And that, because, that has direct impact on growth, that has direct impact on investment decisions, that has direct impact on consumption expenditure decisions, which get deferred. So let's keep in mind, that and a lot of, the appreciation of the dollar and the depreciation of the rupee is actually linked, to this uncertainty. So this uncertainty being the underlying cause, to a great extent, of the dollar strengthening, rupee depreciation, is not good for growth, and it's not good for imported inflation. So that is something, which we all need to be cognizant about. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next would be Mr. Siddharth from Informist.
Thank you, sir. Afternoon, Governor.
Good afternoon.
So, just one question on liquidity. The government's high cash balances in recent years has made the RBI's job of managing liquidity difficult. In the FY26 budget, the WMA limit has been increased substantially to 5 lakh crore. The Economic Affairs Secretary also said the government will aim to keep a lean cash position.
Which limit you said has been increased to 5 lakh?
WMA. The recourse, total recourse
okay.
to WMA.
Okay.
And the Secretary also said that they'll try to keep a lean cash position, but much of the cash holdings is drawn to states' surplus and their investments in 14-day T-bills. I think end of FY24 it was in excess of 2.5 lakh crores. Is there anything happening between the government and the RBI to discourage states from holding such large surpluses? Maybe reduce the interest on these T-bills further, allow them to park it with banks, their money with banks maybe. Second, just on, you mentioned tremendous uncertainties. Does this that we face today, does this make a case for the RBI to perhaps increase its contingency risk buffer over 6.5% recommended by the Jalan Committee? Thank you.
See again your second question and first question. I'll ask DG Rajesh Rao to come in, because there has been some engagement with the state government which he's better aware of. So he'll answer that.
I'll take
or
that.
Mr. Ravi Shankar, he will take care of your question. Coming to your second question, see, the Bimal Jalan committee has given 5.5% to 6.5% ratio of the balance sheet to be maintained as a buffer for us. We are at 6.5%, 31/3/2024. That is, the overall framework is being reviewed, and basis that, if the committee feels that there is any change, could be upward, downward. I'm not suggesting, that because of uncertainties it needs to be increased. I'm not suggesting that. That is under process, and basis that, we will take a decision as per the recommendations of the committee which is reviewing this. For your first question, I request Mr. Ravi Shankar to answer it.
Thank you, sir. I'll start off with a clarification. The 5 lakh crore number you are referring to is probably the usage. That is, every time something is withdrawn, it's cumulatively added. So that doesn't give an idea of the limit. The limit has, remained where it is, quite consistent first half and second half, and that has been adequate so far. But depending on how government's cash position evolves, those limits will be fixed going forward for the first half and second half of the year. Transient liquidity, day-to-day liquidity, is changes because of many reasons, but the larger changes there happen mainly because of government cash balances. So managing day-to-day liquidity is essentially managing the impact of government's expenditures and revenues and the resulting cash balances. That is a job that we do. That is a job that we will continue to do on a day-to-day basis. As far as how state government surplus affects central government's cash balance and therefore has an impact on liquidity in the system, this is something that we have always been sensitizing state governments whenever we interact them. As you would know, we are the debt managers for state governments as well. We discuss with them on ways to manage cash as efficiently as possible, but at the end of the day, their expenditure decisions are their decisions, and the resultant cash surplus is something we have a system under which it is currently managed. So, some of it comes into auction, treasury bills that are auctioned in the non-competitive section. Some of them go as ad hoc treasury bills. So that arrangement has worked fine, and we believe that as we go forward, state governments also will be able to manage their liquidity more efficiently. Thank you.
I may supplement over here that, this is our job. We are not looking, the state governments and the central governments should be, and many of them are, managing their liquidity efficiently. And whatever support, we can give to them, that we are providing. But we are not looking at liquidity being provided by government. No, they have to do their job. They have to manage their cash balances efficiently. And we, taking that into account, we will provide as much liquidity as is required. We are not looking at the government really, to be providing that liquidity. That is not their job. That is our job, and we will continue to do that job.
Just a clarification from my first answer. You said it's being reviewed. You don't know whether the CRB will be.
I think every 5 years or so.
I think the Jalan Committee recommendations were for the period till 31st of March, 30th June 2019 to 2024. Internally, we are reviewing the whole thing and seeing whether any changes are warranted, etc. Then internally, we'll take it up appropriately through the process, and then if we need to engage with the government or the board, we will do it at a later point in time. But the internal review is on in the process.
So this is the entire economic capital framework which is being reviewed?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, sirs. I request Ms. Sangeeta Mehta from Economic Times.
Thank you, sir. So, given that rate cut will immediately bring down the home loans and all the loans that are linked to EBLR, that is given. In your assessment, when do you see the transmission of rate cut in deposit rates and lending rates, the MCLR and the other rates in the system? By when do you see that happening?
See, many of these deposit rates, etc., they are, those deposits which are already there, they are already fixed. New deposits that are going to come in, it is only, with respect to those that these changes will actually take effect. So, obviously, many of them are 5-year deposits, so there will be no change, with respect to those people, who have already taken those deposits. So it will take some time, depending on the tenor, the average tenor that the deposits already have. But it will be our effort, that we provide whatever support and liquidity is required, that this transmission happens as quickly as possible.
Not lending, MCLR.
MCLR, I think, happens on a 6-monthly basis.
Yes.
So the last one, I suppose most of the banks would be doing it in June and December to make it effective from January and July. So the MCLR, I think most of the banks, I think the policy is mostly to do it 6-monthly, and so come June, one should see some revisions.
Thank you, sir.
You want to add? Yeah, please.
No, I just wanted to,
please,
supplement
please
on that. Essentially, the external benchmark linked rates are about 40% on the loan book, on which we will see more immediate impact. In respect of the book linked to MCLR, which is almost equivalent to the EBLR book, it typically takes about 2 quarters for the effect to play out, basis our past experience, because the reset periods are mostly 6 months, but there are also loans that are linked to 3 months or 1 year benchmarks as well. So typically our experience is that it takes about 2 quarters. And as Governor clarified, the existing deposits will have to be carried on the contracted rate. Only new deposits, the rates will change. So in terms of monetary policy transmission to the deposit rates, it again takes at least about 2 quarters. So that's a general trend that we have observed.
Thank you, sir. Sir, with your permission, last 3 questions.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Next, I'll request Mr. Ben from New Indian Express.
Thank you, Puneet. Thank you, Governor. My question is about the 1 trillion tax giveaways in the budget. And if that really takes those who are benefiting from the tax exemption limits, if that really gets translated into consumption, what could be the impact on inflation that? Of course, the budget, from the fiscal point of view, budget is not expansionary, so that makes your job easier. But from a consumption point of view, of course, consumption is fully, if those 1 crore or 50 lakh beneficiaries would be mostly from urban areas where the consumption has been lagging. So what could be the impact? Have you taken into account, or as some reports say that okay, the benefit is not 1 trillion, but it is at best it could be 25,000 crore. So it is not big enough to take into account the monetary policy, or you have looked at it and taken a call on the interest rate now?
All factors, as I said, have been considered by the Monetary Policy Committee in making its judgment. Obviously, the budget was announced, it was out in public, it was known, it was analyzed, and that was also taken into account in deciding about the repo rate cut. Overall, I think the budget is an excellent budget, both from growth perspective as well as I would say from the inflation perspective. Especially as you also mentioned, given that the deficit has been curtailed at 4.4 and not even at the glide path rate of 4.5%. And I am especially very, very pleased to note that agriculture, you are all aware that about 46% of the CPI basket actually is comprised of food. Agriculture gets the prime focus, in this. Of course, it will help not only on growth, but in the medium to long term, it will also help us in controlling inflation. Especially like to drive your attention to the program on vegetables and fruits. Vegetables, please keep in mind, has a 6% contribution in the CPI. Fruits has a 2.9% contribution, 8.9%. There is a scheme, there is going to be a program for food and for fruits and vegetables specifically. I think the inflation pertaining to fruits and vegetables would certainly have, I'm not privy to what would have gone into their minds, but I feel that would certainly have played in their minds. Similarly, I am very happy to note that a mission on pulses again I think has a weight of about also has played a major role in the inflation that we have seen in the recent months. So there is a program there's a mission now which has been announced for pulses, and there are a number of other programs which have been announced for agriculture. I do not think, that this 1 lakh crore of tax relief, I think it was very much desired. Everyone was wanting it. Now that it is there, now counter questions are being asked whether, it will increase inflation, this, that and all. I don't think, those questions are really apt. And I don't think, that this is going to have personally, an impact, an upward impact, in inflation. There is sufficient productive capacity that we have today. Also, the capacity utilization levels are 75%, and with this tax relief, it will only help us in our growth, and it should not have any major impact on inflation.
Sir, can I have one clarification on the economic framework for Jalan Committee? Jalan Committee was an external committee where RBI had members. But this RBI is internally reviewing, or there is an external committee that is reviewing it?
Internal. It's an internal review. It's an internal review which was required to be done, which we will do because that is the time period, as DG Rajeshwar Rao mentioned, the time is over, so it was in for a due, so that will be internally.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, we'll have Ms. Shyama from Doordarshan.
Hello, sir. Sir, my question is, does Trump's pro-crypto stance worry India? And if it does, then what will be the RBI's approach to it?
RBI's thinking on cryptocurrencies has been articulated very clearly, and there is no change in that thinking, because that thinking is based on what our understanding of crypto is, and our understanding of cryptos will not change because some policy has been taken by some country on it. So that remains unchanged. That is our stance. Having said that, as some of you may be aware, that there is a group which is looking at what the country's approach to cryptocurrencies will be, and that group will give its recommendations based on which decisions will be taken by the government, and we'll all follow that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And the last question would be for Mr. Sachin Kumar from Financial Express.
Good afternoon, Governor. After RBI hiked risk weights on unsecured loans in 2023, there has been a significant moderation in growth of personal loans. So, is RBI satisfied with the moderation in growth of personal loans, or more moderation is desired?
I think the short answer is yes, we are satisfied. I don't think more moderation perhaps is required, but I'll request one of the DGs, in case they would wish to, supplement.
I think that answer you have given already. Just to give a rationale behind it, it was an intended impact. Regulatory measures were taken when certain amount of outlier growth was seen in a few segments. As we had anticipated, it is the very same segments which are witnessing additional stress or slippages at this point in time and year related. So the measures were well thought out, and it has had its intended impact. And as Governor clarified, this moderation is all right at this point in time. But as a regulator, we keep our watch on the incoming data, and if that warrants a measure, we will take it, taking into account materiality and proportionality. Otherwise, at this point in time, this moderation was expected, and it's playing out on the same lines.
So, is it correct to assume that now banks can resume higher lending on these segments?
It's primarily the business model that will be pursued by the business entities. It is not our intention to prescribe any particular rate of growth or a product mix. This varies from entity to entity, and there are well-informed boards that guide the management in terms of what should be their growth aspirations. All that what we see is that whether they are in tune with their risk appetite framework, whether any excess eating happening in the system, or any possible risk build-up is occurring, or a concentration risk appearing in any particular area. That is where we would like to intervene. Otherwise, it is not our intention to prescribe any model. And just to use this opportunity to supplement to what Vishwanath as well asked. So every measure that there is an impact and cost analysis that we do, and we take decisions accordingly. So it is not that we will prescribe something which is not felt necessary.
Let me just supplement that. See, we had not stopped, we had not prescribed or mandated or asked the banks or the regulated entities to stop lending. No. The risk weights, I believe, were prior to COVID, they were 125%. They were brought down post-COVID, when we saw, that there is now sufficient and perhaps more than the desirable level of credit growth. The risk weights were brought down to what they existed prior to COVID. So it's not as if we have done something which is kind of abnormal. It is just bringing it back to what the risk weights were in normal times.
Sir, if I can ask a question in continuation to that, while I understand this 125 on unsecured is normalization, what about on NBFCs, sir? Because there was a proactive increase in risk weight in order to sort of curb. NBFC is also concentrating in the sector, and today when we're talking about a growth-oriented approach, and they play a very important role in last mile credit dissemination, would you relook at risk weights on NBFCs? There as well, growth is really getting hurt.
No, maybe I can clarify, sir. See, essentially that particular segment was brought in because of the interconnectedness risk that was building up. See, NBFCs have essentially three types of resources: their own equity, their market borrowings, and then bank finance. Bank finance, which used to be about less than 30%, had gone almost close to 47% of their balance sheet as a resource. So, as I mentioned, we saw a concentration risk building up, resulting in an interconnectedness between two financial entities. So, we brought certain additional risks so that gets moderated. Now, if you look at it, the resources for NBFCs is more or less now distributed as 1/3 each. So, again, it had certain purpose, which may not be, which is something which is holding good even today at this point in time. So, I don't think there is a reason as to review any of these measures at this point in time. But as we clarified, that we'll keep watching the incoming data at any point in time. It's not our intention to stop any particular form of lending or business. It's our intention only to moderate, to ensure an orderly growth, keeping in mind financial stability. That's what that we will do.
Please speak in the mic.
You kept microfinance companies out of the loop when the risk weights were raised at in November of 23. Yes, I just want to understand, since then we've seen a lot of stress and a lot of over leveraging by these microfinance companies, which the FSR also noted. Any thought process there? Would you consider something?
If you read the same regulatory instruction that we brought in November 23, we excluded the growth-oriented sectors like housing or vehicle loans or education loans. We also excluded the small borrowers from the burden of any additional compliance. So at this point in time, there is no other further measure that is contemplated. For handling the stress, in any case, there are other methods to prescribe and handle entities where there are any outlier numbers are seen. But a macroprudential measure at this point in time is not under our contemplation.
Thank you, sirs. With this, we come to the close of this press conference. I would thank Governor and the Deputy Governors for taking your questions. I would request all the friends from media to take an exit on the left-hand side at the back of the hall. And thank you all and have a very pleasant day.
Thank you.
Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to this post-monetary policy conference, first of this calendar year 2025. Friends, we have with us Governor Reserve Bank of India, Shri Sanjay Malhotra.